I have just moved into software development from being a teacher for the last 4 years. I was a math science teacher. And so just sort of moved out of internship into being a real developer as well, which is super exciting. And so I'm actually giving this talk on sort of tips, having that sort of educational background, looking at how you can actually be a really good mentor, and how you can make the most out of your juniors and interns, as I was when I, scripted this for the first time. All right, so when we talk about mentoring in tech as well, there's lots of different sort of definitions of a mentor, and they're all super valuable. So you can have people who are sort of more personal, career, like overall mentors, or you can have people who are specifically mentors, from the technical side of thing. Some people have, sort of more businessy side of mentors. It really depends on what your focus is. They can be, from within your company. They can be from within the community. You can find mentors online. You can pay them. You can just literally go to mentoring websites and pay people to mentor you, which is kind of cool. And mentors obviously come from different levels as well. So sometimes they are senior developers, sometimes they're mid-level, sometimes they're just actually really just only a few steps above the junior themselves. From this perspective of my talk, I'm really mostly focusing on people who are in that mentoring role from within the same company, which is when obviously a lot of the time it's kind of a mandated relationship. It's like something that they're saying, okay, yeah, well, if you're going to be mentoring this person now, have fun, go. There's not necessarily a lot more thought given into it. There's not necessarily a lot of thought given into the process, and there's not necessarily a lot of sort of guidance for the mentor about how they should be doing their job. So juniors are changing. So juniors are not necessarily Mitchell, when he graduated and was, I want to say 20 and fresh out of uni and coming in and being, sorry, I'm thinking of Mitchell today. But yeah, interns and juniors are coming in from a whole range of different areas. They're coming in from boot camps. A lot of people are being self-taught. A lot of people are doing career changes and are going to be bringing that more experience and knowledge to your team. And it's also worth considering in terms of the sort of dynamic between your team members as well. So I'm 7 or 8 years older than Mitchell, and he's like my buddy at work, so he has to tell me how to do things. And I mean, for some people that can be awkward. So you just need to make sure that when you are assigning people that you are considering how comfortable they are in that situation as well, and how comfortable they are giving feedback and things like that. So why juniors? I forgot to change the footer on that particular slide. Let's just ignore that. Note to self. This is my dry run for doing this a couple of other times as well. So thanks, guinea pigs.
You should just fix it as you go. I mean, don't worry about us.
That's okay. I'll take a note and come back to that later. So there's a lot of benefits to juniors. Okay, there's a lot of demand for mid-level and senior developers in lots of different languages and communities within Australia and lots of different cities. And there's a heap of people who are coming into the industry and want to be really good and want to make a difference and want to get involved. And there's kind of that gap a lot of the time between getting those people in at the front door to up to being that mid-level, senior level person. And honestly, the best way to get those mid-level and senior level people at a discounted price is to train them yourself. So actually bring them in and make sure you're training them in the styles that in the way that you want to deliver code. And it also means that you bring them in and you get that loyalty as well. I feel like I'm stuck with Nigel now forever. So from chucking in a little bit of the educational psychology side of things, there's this great concept in education that gets shoved into your throat over and over again because it actually works. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, which sounds super fancy, but it's also mostly just common sense. And in this sort of theory, educational theory, essentially there's 3 levels that people can reach and 3 levels of tasks depending on where a certain person is at. So there are things that they can do alone, okay? Then there are things that they can do with help, and then there's things that they can't do. So the zone of proximal development is this middle one in here where someone needs that bit of support and that bit of guidance. So it's not going to actually help someone grow or develop, not in a term of development, but as a developer. If they're doing things that are really easy, that they're not needing any support to do, it's also going to be completely useless giving them a lot of tasks that they don't understand what they're doing. So even when they finish them, they didn't really have a clue what was going on. In developing, I also think there's kind of like a 4th circle in there, the can do with Google. So obviously there's not a lot of things that myself as a junior can do without Googling something. And then there's the things that you need sort of assistance from a more senior developer in that as well. So sitting within these 2 little circles and having a mix of those as the most of the tasks that they're being given is going to be the best way to actually make sure they are growing and getting better at what they do. Obviously, if you've got tasks that they can do without help, yeah, get them. Like, you know, have them do those tasks and have them feel that success. That's really good. But for optimal growth, you need to make sure that it's that bit of challenge, that they're getting that bit of assistance as they go through. Tying into that is the whole balance between support and challenge. Okay, so we've got a very fancy, complicated diagram here. So we've got more support over that way, so high support, low support. We've got more challenge as we go up. So obviously, tying in with that last one, the place where you want to be, growth, is when they're getting lots of challenge, but also lots of support to address that. The dangerous zone here is if you're giving too much challenge and no support, and that's when you actually do get regression. So if people are going through a lot of activities where they're not being supported, they're finding it really difficult, they start getting stressed, they start doubting themselves, they start getting confused about what they already know, and they do start going backwards. So it's not even just a case of they don't move forward, that can actually be really damaging to the amount of learning and the amount of understanding that someone has. The sweet spot is our growth spot up there, but then it doesn't actually hurt to have a bit of validation as well. That's right. So validation obviously is going to tie in with those really achievable tasks. So they're getting lots of support to do it. It's not a huge challenge, but at least they're feeling good that they're getting something done. But yeah, and then if you're not giving support or challenge and they're just doing really basic tasks all the time, you just get stasis. They're just staying the same and developing, which isn't what you want really at all. If you do, have fun though. Here we go. Why isn't my slides working? You're frozen. Come on. There we go. Okay, so of course the challenge with knowing how to challenge someone is knowing what sort of challenges will challenge them. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do to actually know where someone's at in their learning and know what they still need to know and what sort of support you need to be giving them. Asking them doesn't usually work. And it's probably the go-to, and you know, it's fine in a lot of situations to say, okay, so you know, what do you know about this, or how good are you at that? If someone asks me that, I really don't know most of the time. It's really hard to know where the bar is on something, especially, you know, there's no check boxes. It's not like, do you know how to multiply? You know, do you know how to do 7 times 7? Oh yeah, I can do that, that's awesome. But in development, when someone asks you that, sometimes they want you to know, like, what's 7 times 342 off the top of your head? It's not quite the same scope as what you're expecting to be able to do. And so a lot of the time you'll either think you know something when there's all this extra stuff you don't, or you'll think you don't know something, or that you might think that there's a lot more to something that you don't understand. So asking, do you understand X topic, or how much do you know about Y, isn't necessarily the best way. Definitely a good starting point, but it needs to be made sure that you're looking into it from a few different perspectives as well. One of the good mantras of teaching and many things is the whole see one, do one, teach one concept. Which is that nothing helps us realize what we understand more. This is why I don't put words on slides, because I end up reading them verbatim, which is really boring. But teaching something to someone else, I think we all realize, is a really good way of understanding something, okay? And that doesn't have to be someone who doesn't know the concept. In fact, it's really good to have your juniors and your interns teaching that to someone who knows it really well, because they're the ones who are going to be able to understand where those gaps are as well. So when you're explaining a new topic, give them a few days or a week to sort of go home and practice it, you know, really embed it. Make sure they know that they're going to be expected to teach at least most of the time, because that's really scary and not feeling very supported if you're just thrown in the deep end and being explain this concept that we talked about a week ago and you've completely forgotten. Not super great. But yeah, mix up who they're delivering lessons to. It could be their mentor, it could be someone else who's at a similar level, it could be one of the other seniors. You know, just mixing that up and making sure you're getting feedback. The person themselves, when they're delivering that and when they're preparing that, is going to realize pretty quickly where they're missing bits of information as well. But make sure you're giving them that feedback as well if there's anything they didn't quite understand there. Okay, reviewing code reviews. So getting the juniors to do code reviews is a really good practice. And then also getting them to review their own that they did a little while back. So if they haven't obviously grown enough to be able to pick up their own things, you know, within a month or two, that's something you need to be a little bit concerned about. But yeah, so giving them a variety of examples to review, whether that's more complicated stuff, whether it's fairly simple stuff, making sure you're kind of trying to specifically pick where possible. Obviously this is very time consuming, you can't do it all the but trying to pick a variety of things for them to be able to review so that they can get practice at picking up those things, get practice at just proofreading, get practice at thinking about what the logic is of different things that they're reading. And this is the tough part because it does involve a fair bit of planning in advance, but before you review someone's code, one of your juniors' code, if you kind of just keep a copy of that, it's great, isn't it? Before it's been updated, and then get them to go, obviously you need to review it, you need to make those changes, you need to improve it before it can be merged and used. But going back to that pre-reviewed code for them to be able to review their own work a little bit later is a really good way to see if they're actually picking up on those lessons and what you need to focus on more. All right, there's no such thing as asking too much questions, and there's no such thing as a stupid question, but there is a very good range of questions which indicate someone doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, which is actually really helpful when you're trying to teach someone and when you're trying to help someone learn. So make sure you're keeping sort of track of where people are asking lots of questions. If they're asking questions about the same topic multiple times, and that's one you probably need to make sure you take some time apart to cover more solidly. And you also need to notice if they're not asking questions. So if you're explaining a topic and they're just sitting there smiling and nodding, sometimes, yeah, great, they understand that, but sometimes that just means they really, really don't know what's going on. And you actually need to go back a few steps to make sure that they figure it out. And again, that's a situation where you can ask, like, are you understanding what I'm saying? But most of the time they're probably going to smile and nod to that as well. 14-year-olds are really good at this, just smiling and nodding, and you're like, do you understand? They're like, you're looking terrified. Why do you look terrified? Do you understand? They're like, they just get more scared the more you ask. So just try to, come back to it a little later, have, questions for them rather than just that whole do you understand thing is good as well. All right, so part of being a good mentor is if you're in a company where you are supporting those mentors, making sure that you're giving them what they need to be able to do mentoring properly. So you need to make sure they have the time to do that. So mentoring isn't something that comes naturally to easy. Mentoring isn't something that everyone is skilled at or experienced at. And mentoring, while a lot of it is done on the fly, while a lot of learning does happen really quickly as you're going through things, you need to make sure you're giving time both to the mentors and the mentees to be able to actually really go into concepts rather than just get something done. A lot of what I'm saying today is really time consuming, and I'm very aware of that, and it's one of those things that obviously we can't do all of this perfectly all the time. No one's expecting me to, the same way I don't change my toothbrush every 3 months, even though I meant to. We've got the ideal and we've got reality, but making sure you're trying to find a little bit of scheduled time to actually go through concepts just for the sake of teaching them rather than necessarily just getting something done. Making sure that the mentors and mentees both have that opportunity to provide feedback to each other and to whoever is kind of supervising that relationship as well. If that particular relationship isn't working well, then that's something you need to look at and fix and see if you can, address what the issues are or see if you can match them with someone better. But also feedback on the mentoring process, feedback on am I getting enough support? Am I having enough time to do my job, again, from both the mentor and the mentee's perspective, and feedback on just sort of generally what progress is being made as well. So if the junior feels like now your phone works. If they're feeling like if the mentor and mentee both have a similar idea of how that junior is progressing, that's usually a good sign. If the mentee doesn't feel like they're progressing and the mentor does, that's probably okay as well. But if it's the other way around, someone's like, I feel like I'm learning so many things, like they're doing terribly, then you probably need to address what's happening there. But making sure you have those sort of opportunities, because it's not something that someone thinks about in their day-to-day. It's like, oh, I'm going to take the time to write some emails and reflect on how this mentoring is going. But making sure there's sort of processes in place there help. Make sure that both people understand what is needed out of that relationship, so how much time is expected, what sort of support is going to be provided, what sort of situations in which you go to your mentor and where you don't, okay? So I go to Mitchell for like 99% of my problems at work, but I'm slightly starting to irritate other people. It's a change. But there's a lot of situations where your mentor might be a really great person for some queries and some aspects, and they might not be the person for other things, so making sure you sort of are clear on what to expect from both people.
Obviously this is probably more relevant in larger companies where there are a whole lot of different areas and you don't actually have like HR and things like that, but you know, still. Okay, sometimes you need to spend money and not time. Your developer's time, your mentor's time, your mentee's time is really valuable. And in terms of learning, there's actually a whole lot of great resources out there where people can learn without taking up someone else's time. In my case, like one of the ones that I sort of go to sometimes is Upcase, you know, and there's lots of other resources out there that are, you know, not free but not super expensive, and they can actually save your, you know, mentors and your seniors a lot of time rather than explaining something. Where there's, you know, really great videos. Railscast is another example, but it's free now, so yay. Provide recognition and reward. This is for the mentors. I mean, yes, your mentees, like definitely, obviously, pat them on the head and stuff as well. Don't stop, you know, giving them rewards. But mentoring is really hard, and it's not what most people sign up for when they go into a role. I mean, I was a teacher, and even I, sometimes it's like, oh, this is exhausting, you know, when you're taking on that sort of extra, you know, personal investment in someone's education and someone's progress. And so making sure you know, actually acknowledge the fact that this is not necessarily what they signed up for, and not necessarily something that's easy for them, and it's something that they put a lot of work into, and a lot of effort into, and a lot of thought into. And last one, mentors need mentors too. So I've talked a lot about, you know, juniors being the ones needing mentoring, but making sure that this is something that goes throughout the company. So making sure that your mid-level and senior levels have that person they can go to, have someone who's actually thinking about where they can go further, how they can develop more, and making sure that that's happening at all levels of the company. Okay, pretty much done. Training juniors well is the best way to get skilled seniors. Know the level your junior is at, and know the ways that you can find that. So making sure that you're, you know, both sort of tracking and measuring their progress. Making sure you're providing that balance of support and challenge. Making sure that time is needed, is given to planning and actual face-to-face time with mentoring. And your mentors need mentoring too. And that's it. And there's no more slide, and it doesn't go to a nice black screen at the end because it's Canva, not Keynote, but that's it. Thank you.